The next item is item number 20, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 15-6543, block 1399, lot 74, 605 Park Avenue in the Upper East Side Historic District, an apartment building designed by Sylvan Bean and built in 1953 to 54. This is an application to replace windows, enclose terraces, modify the ground floor, and install a canopy. And this was read into the record on June 3rd.
Hearing open then for that purpose. Motion, second, without objection. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Gabrielle Dombrowski, Preservation Staff. This application is for 605 Park Avenue. It's a large apartment building on the corner of Park Avenue and East 65th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. The designation report describes the building as having no style, and the building was constructed in 1953. The application before you today has a few components, including replacing the windows, enclosing the remaining open balconies at the Park Avenue elevation. So this is the time of designation photo, the 1980s tax photo, an existing condition photo, and a rendering of the proposed. The balconies are located at the corners. Installing through-wall mechanical A-sleeves centered beneath the windows, modifying the openings at the ground floor, recladding the ground floor, and replacing the entrance canopy, which is currently canvas, will be replaced with a canvas canopy. Barry Rice, the project architect, is here to further explain and answer any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Presented just last week.
It was read into the record, but this is the first time the commission is seeing it.
This is as if
Okay.
it's a public hearing, we're going to take
Yes,
this.
thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
As Gabriella said, this project has several components. I will show you broadly where we are, what we're doing, and then I'll go through each of the components in turn. We're on 65th Street and Park Avenue on a corner building, a large Sylvan Bean building from 1953. The building over its current lifespan it started life with open balconies on the corners and a series of open terraces in the middle of the facade. Most of the corner balconies and all but one of the middle terraces have been enclosed over the last 20, 30 years in various ways. There has been very little opportunity for this group to comment, I think, under the earlier enclosures. And so what we've tried to do is to establish an approach, a vocabulary, if you like, on how we might enclose the balconies, but to recall the original architecture detailing that would have had railings to protect people using the balconies. So in closing the balconies, we are replacing the existing aluminum windows with aluminum windows.
Several of them are enclosed.
These indicate the existing balconies that are open, 9 on the corner, 1 in the center. Our intention is to put in aluminum windows to replace all of the existing enclosures so that they're all uniform and it's all done in one hit. In addition, to have a secondary element on the surface of the windows, standing off the surface of the windows, that would recall the railings that appeared in these locations on the building. The base of the building currently has a canvas canopy that is a little awkwardly proportioned for the shape of the opening, for the rectilinear opening. We're proposing to replace that with a canopy that fits more comfortably, we believe, with the scale of the opening here and the scale of the window above. There's a bit of a tight fit between the two here. It kind of reads as one opening. The most significant change we're making at the base of the building is to bring a recessed storefront, if you like, that has large windows into the lobby, forward to the line of the facade of the building. Currently, this column here and this column here are freestanding columns. Here and here, of a different stone, a different granite, to the balance of the two-story base. The idea, the proposal here is to bring this glass from the lobby forward to the same plane as the glass on the rest of the building, relative to these columns here, which makes them appear like this. just on the materials of the building. The building is predominantly white brick. This is a sample of the actual white brick here. The current two-story base is covered in this granite. This is not exactly the same granite, it's not the same variety, but it looks very, very close. This is exactly the stone on the freestanding columns here. Our proposal is to provide a plain granite base to the building, Fontenay limestone in the lower two floors of the building. I'll explain why we're going that route in a moment. To replace the windows with aluminum of this color and bronze of this color. The bronze would be in the detailing of all of the new through-the-wall openings. Currently, through-the-wall openings appear in a rather random fashion on the facade, usually not centered on the windows on top of them. So we're enlarging the openings and the existing brick so that there would be a repetition, a symmetry, if you like, between the openings and the windows above. They will be in bronze. Also in bronze will be the detailing in front of each of the corner and central balcony enclosures that repeat exactly the sight lines and arrangement of the original railings that are being removed or were removed. This is a detail of how a typical central terrace will be enclosed. And this is a detail of how the corner balconies will be enclosed. I think I'll stop there.
Okay.
Are your sample of work?
Yes.
Okay, questions while we're looking? Anything?
I actually can see why, the balconies are being enclosed. Is there any way in which, are the windows all the same color? I mean, is there a way of creating a little bit of sense of the shadow of the original, recessed balcony, so to speak? Not much.
Is there a way to enclose the balcony and make it look like an enclosed?
Yeah, a little bit.
I wish I could think of a way. I don't know. I mean, we've got glass, and that's going to reflect light. It's going to always look like an enclosure. So our gesture was obviously to recall the railings that originally would be the prominent element, and that's as far as I can figure out how to go.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is the brick going to be dealt with in any way?
The brick is in remarkably good condition. We're not going to do, there's very little repair needed. We're not touching the brick. We are making sure that pointing is redone. The whole building will be scaffolded to replace the windows, but it's for a white brick building, in remarkable condition. It's been well maintained over the years.
And from a kind of, I guess, preservationist perspective, tell me a little bit about your opinion on the infilling of the open base.
Yes. From a preservation point of view, the change of geometry at the base would change the relationship of this building to other bean buildings that also have recessed gardens. However, there are buildings, I'm not sure I'm accurate in saying they're bean buildings, but there are buildings that do not have that recess in them. My feeling is as you walk into the building today, the combination of the two different granites and the recessing creates a very dingy, uninspired entrance. This way we're trying to add light, bring light in and make it feel more appealing as an entrance. And the same comment goes with the canopy at the entrance.
Just a question about that. Why did you carry the, whatever it is, base level all the way across the water?
This here?
Yeah, why didn't you carry that all the way across with the same? Why are you dropping it down in between?
We wanted to mark these windows, which as they are today, are larger windows than the side windows. This is a window into a doctor's office. These are the windows into the lobby. So it's really a statement that the lobby or significant spaces behind that. That's why we did it.
Okay. Barbara Zay, testimony.
Barbara Say of the Historic Districts Council. It is a shame that so many of the terraces have already been enclosed, but since this application simply finishes the job, HDC does not object to it. We do, however, have concerns about the ground floor alterations. The recessed entry and planters are distinctive aspects of the ground floor layout and of the entire composition of the building, thus we object to filling them in. The configuration of the planters and the recessed doorway form a nice symmetrical rhythm of solids to voids that should not be destroyed. Further, HDC objects to the proposed limestone cladding at the base of the building. The existing gray color of the base is a nice complement to the white glazed brick above, with which the beige color of the limestone would most certainly clash. Thank you.
Okay, Michael Hall.
Michael Hall, Friends of the Upper East Side. While this building is by no means extraordinary, it has some interesting design elements that are typical to this kind of building and which would be lost if the current proposal is approved. By making a few adjustments, it would be relatively easy to achieve the desired outcome of the proposal while also mitigating those changes. Although we regret the loss of any original design components, the Preservation Committee at Friends understands the practical considerations that went into the decision to enclose the open balconies. We applaud both the retention of the balcony railings as an indication of the original silhouette and the decision to regularize all of the enclosures. We take issue, however, with the choice of bronze color for the railings as it contrasts with the existing material and will greatly alter the current monochrome facade. Replacement should be made in kind to maintain the original design intent. Further, the standardization of HVAC grills is a positive step forward, as long as the material selection for the grills does not detract from the facade. More troubling is the two-story base at the ground level. The recladding of the polished granite and limestone makes no sense contextually and relates little to the existing building and other buildings of its type. Additionally, the removal of the recessed garden next to the entry would further detract from the pedestrian experience. Our concern regarding material selection carries to this area of the proposal as well. The materials for the windows, cladding, and the water table base should be replaced in kind or with an approximation of what is extant. The proposed changes stray too far from the original design and do so unnecessarily. We ask the Commission to work with the applicant to incorporate these important changes. Thank you.
Okay, Community Board recommends approval, full board as presented. Reaction or comment on what's been said in the testimony?
Yes.
Barry?
I
Yeah.
didn't miss my point about the French limestone we're using here.
Yeah.
The intention here was to provide a texture in the stone that is similar to the texture that exists in today's stone. In other words, it has a very granular appearance here.
It's right there.
The French limestone has a lot of fossil in it, and does have a lot of interest when you get up close, as opposed to an Indiana limestone that would address the issue of being a cool color to balance this, but would also look like concrete most of the time. We didn't want to go that route. So that was the reasoning behind the choice of limestone, which I would argue is a material which is very commonly found, very familiar in this historic district, as is the flaming granite base. The intention is not for the railing bronze to be a contrasting color. We did that for the purpose of a rendering to identify the different materials. The intention is to show a similar color as we're showing in this sample here, the pre-oxidized bronze.
Okay. Michael Devonshire, discussion?
Yeah.
Please.
Generally, I'm okay with everything having to do with this application, with the exception of the recessed, the demolition and removal of the recessed entry garden. I find that to be a very significant feature of this building, and the removal of it is done at the detriment of this historic building.
I agree with that. I think that once again we come up with the against the naming of a building's style as being somewhat contrary to how I think that the building does have a style. It may not have a style that lots of people love, or it may not be a great example of its style, but it's definitely a modern building. And as such, I think that the creation of that outer garden is a fifth generation bastardized version of Pelote and meant to signify a modernist intervention in a traditionalist environment. And as such, I think that the applicant, who could certainly come up with a way of making that place for dogs to go to the bathroom a brighter and more pleasant experience without actually enclosing it and turning it into the lobby. And I think that changing its materiality, changing its shape, changing its depth even, but I think retaining the sense of modernism or modernity that it was intended to convey is worth trying to preserve. I think that the choice of the limestone is understandable. I don't particularly love it, but I don't think it's inappropriate. I think it does shift the color palette of the building to a warmer one, and because the brick is not going anywhere, I'm not sure it's going to work. And it may look like what it is, which is a gussying up of a tired, unloved white brick building. But I can accept it, although I would suggest that a cooler material would be more appropriate. I think that the window solution is fantastic, and I applaud the applicant and the applicant's client for committing the resources to making the building, to improving the building. And even though it does result in a modification of a significant design feature, I think it does so in a respectable way. I think that the applicant's rendering will be more effective than the actual material chosen, where the contrast is dialed down, and I think it'll get lost against the building. I'd suggest that they explore keeping it truer to the rendering, but I think all that can be done at a staff level.
I agree with a lot of those comments. With respect to the infill, I agree that the loss of the reference to the pilotis, or at least those columns, is regrettable and probably shouldn't be done, especially in sort of blending them into the facade. It seems to me that it's true that those recessed gardens don't work at all. Stuff doesn't really grow there. They're sort of sad things. But it seems to me there might be a way of accomplishing both things. Maybe sort of if you think about Manhattan houses where there's a garden inside also and outside. So maybe if you bring the glazing forward towards the columns, but the garden is on the interior, there's some reference to that, but I think the columns need to remain freestanding and need to remain in that contrasting material. And then that kind of then goes back to what the materials are, because if the columns remain black, then how does that work with this limestone? I'm not really sure. There's lots of these examples of the limestone bases on the white brick buildings on the Upper East Side, whether or not they're in historic districts, and that's just because, you know, nobody really likes it's not fancy enough without the limestone. And it seems to me that there are other materials where you could get a more appropriate color palette that's sort of in the grays range without going to classic limestone. There's probably other materials that are not granite, because a lot of the granites aren't working either on those bases. So I'd suggest continuing to search for that. I do think that the awning is a great improvement. The enclosure of the balconies is a really great idea, because they're just a hodgepodge all the time, and it's calling. In that sense, you know, yes, it's giving up some of the formal relationship of the building or formal structure of the building, but it's also addressing the reality that individual tenants have enclosed the balconies, and now at least there's a way of unifying that, and I think it's a really good solution.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those the comments that other commissioners have made. I do think that preserving the recessed garden should be done, and it shouldn't be lost in this case. I think that the color should be or material should be a cooler choice, and the applicant obviously could work with the staff to achieve that. I think the fenestration and the grills, the work on that is good, and I can support that. And I think that the canopy is an improvement. So I think that, you know, I could approve it without the, without the garden disappearing, but if I don't know if that needs to come back, because Well, they could
Gotta
return,
maybe
if they
come
could
back to us
return
with
on
the
that element
material
or
at the
not, is the
first two
question.
floors.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that overall, what's been proposed is appropriate, but I too think that the first floor cutout recess with the rows in front between the columns that come down is an important feature that I think it should only be removed if you have a really good reason. In this particular case, to make it part of the lobby, I don't really, size-wise, I'm sure the thing is necessary, but I think just in terms of having the lobby there, I think it's good to have something that you can develop that is something that you see from the lobby rather than just the sidewalk. And so I guess I'm also saying that I think that that part should remain, and I appreciate the other efforts in terms of centering the grills and changing the finish and those kinds of things, and the way they were enclosing the corner balconies, I think is all good.
Okay. So everything, but we should see the bottom two, we should see it, because the materials of and the garden incorporation, everything else is provable, appropriate, but to bat those two things around, bring it back to for a final decision at that point, not take an action on the rest of it today. Motion to close, second. Hearing closed. One last item here.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.